and welcome to the Pragmatic Product Chat Series, where we tackle the biggest challenges facing today's product management, product marketing, and other market and data-driven professionals with some of the best minds in the industry. I'm Rebecca Kalogeris for Pragmatic Institute and your host for this episode. Today, we have a good friend of the show back on today. We have Mark Stiving. Mark Stiving is a leading thinker, writer, coach, teacher on the subject of pricing. He was the sort of brains behind our price course. He was an instructor with us a long time. I've known this man for a long time, and he is passionate about all things pricing. So today we're going to talk about kind of helping people understand whether or not they have a pricing problem. And probably put another way, maybe it's not a problem, but do you have a pricing opportunity? Are there things you can do differently that can dramatically and immediately affect sort of your bottom line and your top line at the company? And how can you tell what that might be? So we're going to dive right into that. So without any further ado, welcome, Mark.
Rebecca, that is the first time you've introduced me and not insulted me. Thank you very much.
Oh, the show's not over yet, Mark.
Okay.
But it is funny because as I was doing this, I was like, oh, I've made fun of him. I've teased him about that. And I've teased him about that. So I guess, we don't have any. But I'm sure something will come to me as we go on.
Okay, good.
Usually I ask people their origin story here, but we've heard your origin story. And if you haven't, you can go check out some other great episodes that Mark and I've done. So instead of your origin story, I want to ask you what you think the single biggest mistake people make in pricing is.
I think the single biggest mistake is that people don't understand what the word value means. It was funny, as you were doing the introduction for me and you say he's a pricing expert. I have to say, in all honesty, I'm known as a pricing expert, but I think of myself as a value expert. If I have one superpower in this world, it's helping companies understand how their customers value their products. And if we think about pricing, and we all say the words value-based pricing, but we don't understand what that word value actually means. So if there's a single problem that everybody has, it's value. Now, I could give you about a dozen more single problems if you want, but that's probably my biggest.
No, and actually it's a really good point because it's interesting when we're talking about, do you have a pricing problem or pricing opportunity? In the same way, when I think about what you do, it's about understanding value, capitalizing on your fair share of that value, communicating the value, right? You kind of handle all of that. But when we talk about pricing opportunities and pricing problems, we also mean actually a whole lot more than just pricing. So much more areas of opportunity to explore than just like, what's the number at the end?
Yes. And so when I think through the pricing problems that I deal with all the time, what I try to do is understand how is it that customers are valuing products, but customers are all different. And so now we start thinking about segmentation. We think about market segmentation. We think about pricing segmentation. We think about what product portfolios will we put together, or what the packaging would look like. We think about what our marketing messages should be to these different market segments. So all of this is really related to understanding who is it that cares about what value. Now, can I say I've recently defined the word value?
Excellent.
Because the word value is so confusing. Everybody uses it in so many different ways, but I've recently defined it in a way that Pragmatic should love. And that is, value is the result of solving problems.
Love it. Love it.
Isn't that cool?
Yes. Yes.
And so in truth, most of what I do comes back to, can we figure out what the heck the problems are that we're solving for customers? And everybody who's taken pragmatic courses knows that this is hard. This is not an easy thing to figure out, and yet we need to learn to think that way.
Yeah, and I think what you talk about really is that how do you capitalize on the value you deliver? So that means understanding the value you deliver, understanding who values it, when they value it, and then how do you, as you said, price, segment, package, talk about it in order to get the most of it. All of that is what we mean when we say we have a price opportunity. Price opportunity then is the wrong word. You have a profit opportunity, you have a revenue opportunity, because all of those things are going to help you drive the numbers at the end of the day.
Right, absolutely. If you think about, in pragmatic classes, we talk about good, better, best, right? Especially in the price class. And if you just think about good, better, best, imagine a company who has a single product. They don't have a good, better, best portfolio. Well, how do we price it? Well, we can put a price on a product. But if we could craft a good, better, best product portfolio around the way people value our products, suddenly we've got three different prices. And now we can capture more from people who are willing to pay more. We get less from people who aren't willing to pay as much. And so therefore, but we're still winning that business. And so packaging is still pricing.
Yeah. Well, okay. So one of the things I know you think about when you think about this, or where are the opportunities, is there are 6 areas. And let's go through all 6. I want to tell you that the first one is actually what I thought you were going to say was the biggest problem that you see in pricing. I like your answer better, but if I was going to channel my inner Mark, I would have been like, he would say that people don't raise their prices enough. And it is an opportunity, right? So talk a little bit about that, and then let's go through all 6.
It's a huge opportunity. And here's why people don't raise their prices enough. Well, there's lots of reasons, but here's the number one reason is they're afraid. But the reason they're afraid is because they don't understand value. Right? Here's what they're thinking. Oh, I got to raise my prices, and I'm going to have to raise prices on all of my customers and all of my products in every situation. And we'll think of that as an across-the-board price increase. And can I say, if I had to do an across-the-board price increase, I would be scared.
Yeah.
Right.
As you should be.
But different people value our products differently. Different products have more value than other products. So if we think of, we'll take it to the extreme for a second. Think of every single transaction we do. Some of those transactions we're delivering a whole lot more value than we're capturing. And some of those transactions we're not delivering as much value. And so we're probably capturing our fair share, or maybe more than our fair share. When we think about raising prices, what we're trying to do is find those transactions where we're delivering a whole lot more value than what we're charging for in price. How do we do that? We do that by thinking about different customers, which customers value our products more, which products are we delivering more value on, which situations do we find that buyers are really value our products the most, use cases. So there's a lot of great reasons to think about how do we raise prices, when do we raise prices, but everybody should be raising prices. In fact, I just wrote a blog the other day that said, if you haven't raised prices in the last 3 years, you actually gave a 20% price decrease because of inflation.
It's true. And I read that and I remember thinking, oh, that's painful. It's very true, right? Inflation's been so crazy and the economy has been crazy. So, there's reasons you can justify why you haven't, but at the end of the day, when you're talking profitability, that's the kind of hit you're taking by not doing. And you talked about some other things that would signal that you have a raising price opportunity, right? You said different people get value a different way. So if everybody pays the same price, there's probably an opportunity to raise prices, right? If you haven't done
probably an opportunity.
Certainly in 3 years, but even if it's been a year, you probably have an opportunity to find the areas where there are prices to raise. So there's lots of good signals there.
Yeah, I don't usually say this very often, but I believe wholeheartedly that companies every single quarter should be thinking about their pricing. Yeah. Every quarter. Right now, it doesn't mean you have to change all of your prices every quarter, but you should be thinking, what are we going to do this quarter?
And I think, again, once you start to think of it not as like one button that I can push, I have one price and I'm moving it here and there, and you really start to think of it as a dashboard where I can turn a little knob over here for these people and a little knob over there, it starts to becoming much more fluid, right? And you're making little tweaks to a small product subset or a small segment subset because you're really thinking about each of those dials that you can move much more independently than if everything is the same. Yeah, do not change your prices for everybody every 3 months, or you will not have happy customers.
That is true.
Yes,
that is very true.
Okay, so another one of those areas of opportunity, because I think we see maybe it is underutilized, is market segmentation that you talk about, right?
Yeah. So first off, I agree 100% with Pragmatic on how to do market segmentation. And so market segmentation is a group of companies or individuals with a common set of problems. Now, let's go through an example, if we may, just for fun. And let's talk about Uber. and Uber's pricing. If you've ever taken the price class from Pragmatic, you've seen me do what I'm about to do using LinkedIn, but now I'm going to use Uber, slightly different. And if you think about the different use cases for Uber, there's lots of different use cases. Rebecca, I'm going to let you toss them out first. What do you use Uber for?
Going to the airport, getting food delivered.
Getting food delivered. Well, so let's talk about going to the airport for a second, right? So there's going to the airport for a day trip. I may not take Uber. There's going to the airport for a 2-week trip.
Yeah.
I might take Uber.
Absolutely.
Right? There's going to the airport at Christmas time when there's no parking at the airport. Mm-hmm. I might take Uber. Right? And so it's very context dependent. So I want food delivered. If I'm sick, absolutely. If I'm in my pajamas and I just don't want to change, absolutely. Right? So are we going to have food delivered to our house? So there's all these contexts around it. Mm-hmm. Have you ever considered sending your daughter on an Uber without you in it?
No. I can see the scenario and it makes sense, but I have not.
Can you imagine the value of that? How much would you pay to know that she was safe?
Oh, for like the safety, like this is it would be huge. And also like, look, some of us I only have one kid. I know friends of mine who have 3, and like the amount of shuffling the children around that it takes is quite like, you're like, I would pay to solve that problem, but you always get stuck on but it has to be someone I really trust.
Yep, exactly. Let's see. People take Uber to doctor's appointments. Mm-hmm. I personally use Uber instead of renting a car nowadays, almost every time I travel. Right? It's just so much easier for so many reasons. Now I go through, by the way, you mentioned Uber Eats. I want food delivered. Mm-hmm. Do you know that Uber also delivers packages?
No, but it makes complete sense, right?
Doesn't it though?
Right.
Why wouldn't they?
It's one of my favorite extension brand stories, right? I have this asset. What else could I do with it?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so when we start thinking about Uber, let's talk about market segmentation. So if I'm Uber and I want to advertise to you, I want to communicate to you, I want to pick a market segment, how do I pick a market segment? And what Uber has done is they've said, hey, what are the common problems? So I'm going to call the Uber that we all think of as Uber people for a second, right? So we have Uber people, and then we have Uber Eats, and then we have Uber Package. So they've crafted this set of market segments around the problems the people are trying to solve, right? So the problem I want to solve is move a person, I want to move food, I want to move packages, right?
Yep.
And so that's a really good set of market segmentation that they've crafted. And those of us who are buying, we automatically put ourselves in a segment, right? Oh, I want to buy food today. I want McDonald's delivered to my house. I'm now in Uber Eats. I want to get to my hotel from the airport. I'm now in Uber People.
It's a good example too, because you're not always in the same market segment for Uber. I think for a lot of us, when we think B2B, we think, okay, they're always in that same segment. But you can see here that in such a diverse offering as Uber, I move from segment to segment.
Yeah. And by the way, that's true in LinkedIn too, right? Because you've got recruiters and salespeople in the same company, but it's 2 different packages, 2 different market segments that LinkedIn talks to.
Yeah.
So defining a market segment is the beginning of what I refer to as a value architecture. If you haven't created good market segmentation, then you're not going to be able to capture the value that you really want to deliver. And we're going to see a bunch of these other decisions we're about to talk about are really dependent upon, have you crafted a good market segment strategy? Or do you know your market segment? And so my recommendation for all companies, if you have a product that you haven't defined a market segment for, and you're essentially saying, I sell to anybody who wants to buy from me, I think of that as you're selling a platform. So you solve a whole lot of different problems for a whole lot of different people. Let's pretend that you are Uber for a second, and all you do is you have cars out there that say, hey, if someone wants to ride in a car, we can do that. And then you pick a specific market segment and say, this segment is really valuable. They're willing to pay us a lot. Let me craft the features that I need to and go define that market segment and build a product for that market segment. This probably makes more sense if I jump to the LinkedIn example real quickly and just say, look, if you imagine LinkedIn is just resume storage and search, but recruiters get so much value out of having the access to LinkedIn. I could craft a recruiter product and sell it to recruiters, and they pay me a lot of money. Right? So that's what I think everybody, if they're not doing market segmentation day, step one, go find the market segment that values your product the most. And how do you craft a product specifically for that segment and charge them a heck of a lot more money?
One of the reasons I love that too is that I think when we talk market segmentation, sometimes we get overwhelmed, right? Especially if we're I could be anything to everybody. You start being like, oh man, if I did something for each market segment, that's, 7, 8, 10. Yeah, well, look, we can grow there one day, right? But the point is to find one right now that is particularly valuable to your organization and start with one. All right. You're just taking a bite of the apple. We're not trying to swallow it whole. But you will learn a ton from that you can then use and duplicate where it makes sense in other market segments.
Absolutely. Can I give you one more quick example?
Oh, please.
Zoom is absolutely a platform, right? We can use Zoom to talk to our mom, and we can use Zoom to close a multi-million-dollar deal.
Schools.
Right? Boy.
Right? Yeah.
and so what did Zoom do? I mean, they still sell their platform, right? We still have access to the platform, but they've crafted something called Zoom telehealth. So if you're a doctor and you want to do patient visits over Zoom, you can use Zoom telehealth and meet all the HIPAA requirements. And I'm sure that they're taking notes and putting data directly into the Epic database. And right, so you can just imagine, because I've crafted a product for a specific solution, a specific set of problems, I can now charge a lot more money for that than I would for the generic platform solution.
And I would charge more. And I would also, I imagine you start to get a much better win rate, right? It's kind of a win-win, as they might say. But because, you're really speaking directly to their problem and it feels tailored to them, even if it is primarily the same features, just with the wrapping that's in there, that matters. That resonates in a very different way.
So you're right. It matters, even if you just call it, Zoom for doctors, it matters. But it turns out that it's pretty easy to craft a few extra features that only doctors want and doctors really want. And now we've crafted this product that's really valuable to them. So since I know where you're going to go next, I'm going to waylay your conversation and your questions. And I want to jump down to communicating value.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's do it.
So go ahead and ask the question if you want.
No, I wasn't going to go. So I'm intrigued. What was I going to say, Mark?
Well, that's one of the 6 decisions that we have to make. One of the 6 things we have to do. And communicating value fits so well right after market segmentation.
Got it.
Because if we're thinking about Uber, it's really hard to say, let me communicate value about Uber. But in fact, what they used to say is, instead of taking a taxi, right? No, okay, got it. Who cares, right?
Yeah.
But now, once you start thinking about 3 different market segments, you've got Uber People, Uber Eats, Uber Package. They have different marketing for Uber People than they do for Uber Eats. Why is that? Because we're solving different problems. And so when we think about how do we communicate the value of what we do, what we want to do is talk about our customers' problems and the results they might expect. What did I say value was when we started this off? It's a result of solving problems. I'm sorry, that wasn't a quiz.
No, I was like, I know. It was money exchanged for solving problems like this.
Right. It's the result of solving problems. And so if we think about market segmentation and communicating value, what we really want to do is, once we're inside a market segment, it's much easier for us to talk to recruiters about how LinkedIn helps recruiting. It's much easier for us to talk to salespeople about how LinkedIn helps sales. It's much easier for us to talk to consumers about how you can have food directly to your house and you don't have to go out and take your pajamas off, right? So well, I guess I should have said change clothes.
I mean, I don't know how it works in Reno, Mark,
but this whole communicating value piece is so tightly related to market segmentation. Now, the other thing that comes with communicating value is, have you articulated those problems? Have you articulated the results that someone might get? So I often teach a tool called value tables, which is all about determining what are the problems, what are the results that someone might expect. And so that communicating value piece is huge. I find companies do such a horrible job at communicating the value the way their customers think about value.
That's really, really true. Often I'm asked, by colleagues and clients to look at their website, right? And so often the problem is, I don't know what you do because you are talking about the platform. You are showing all the things you could do, but I need you to give spaces for each of these market segments so that they can see themselves reflected in it. And then you can talk specifically that you understand their problems and that you solve them. And that is, it is definitely one of the biggest things I see as I review clients or company websites is like, oh, well, that's you haven't done that piece of it. I'm not communicating to anyone specifically. And so it becomes very generic and not nearly as compelling.
Yeah. And the number one reason for that is I call it the curse of knowledge. I didn't invent that term, but that's what I think of as the curse of knowledge. And that is that we hear something, we can hear one of our features, we can think about our product. We know exactly what that does and why it's so valuable, why it's so incredible. But unless you're an expert in our industry and an expert in our product, you don't know that.
Yeah.
The example I love to use is if I were to describe a computer to you, you'd probably be able to say, yeah, I get it. That's probably good enough for me or not good enough for me, because you're kind of an expert in computer buying. You bought enough of them. You've used them most of your life. Now imagine your grandfather goes into Best Buy to buy his very first computer, and the geek behind the counter starts saying, this has got 8 gigabytes of SD RAM and 7 terabytes of SSD. And he's like, I want to talk to my grandkids over the interwebs. Does it do that? Right? And so there's a huge difference between experts and non-experts.
Yeah.
And we start to think all of our customers are experts, and they're not. Most of our new customers are non-experts.
And really, most of our materials, the sales team and the marketing team are trying to talk to new customers. Yes, there's a level of retention, but most of what we're doing is talking to new customers. Too often, we've honed our conversations just talking to our current ones, right? And then they also start to know what those features mean and those pieces. And we really miss communicating value in a way that really talks to new clients and the problems they have.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm pretty sure you're going to jump to pricing metrics next, aren't you?
Oh, I was not. You're just skipping one. You did it to me on purpose,
too. No, I'm doing it in the order that I want to talk about it.
Well, then what we should have done is actually talked about this ahead of time. But let me think. Mark, now I would think in communicating value, one of the ways we communicate that value and signal it is by what we are charging for. Pricing metrics, you might call that.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm going to go back and re-record an introduction where I make fun of you, Mark.
Okay. So here's why I wanted to go to pricing metrics next. Is it isn't really communicating value, but it's the fact that once you're inside a market segment, the way they get value is pretty similar, right? So the way I get value in Uber from Uber people is being transported from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. The way I get value from Uber Eats is I don't have to go out to the restaurant. I don't have to leave my house. The food just comes to me. And so when we start thinking about how do our customers get value, as we choose a pricing metric is what is it that you charge for? Mm-hmm. So as we choose a pricing metric, what we want to do is have it as highly correlated to the way our customers receive value. That's what we're after. Now, think about Uber for a second. Uber people, they typically price based on the distance that we're going to travel, the amount of time we think it's going to take, and the amount of drivers there are available and the amount of demand there is, right? And so I can't say that the demand piece is highly correlated with what I'm willing to pay, but the distance probably is. Mm-hmm. The time probably is. So they're trying to correlate that with willingness to pay. When you go to Uber Eats, usually they charge me a percentage of the bill. By the way, they also charge the restaurant a percentage of the bill. right? And so they've got a very different set of pricing metrics for the different market segments. And so what we want to start doing is thinking to ourselves, once we've defined these market segments, how is it that our customers are getting value from our product? And how can I charge for something that's very highly correlated with that? The whole point is the more value they get, the more they're willing to pay us, the more they will pay us.
Can you give us some B2B examples of this?
Well, sure. LinkedIn is a B2B example, right? So LinkedIn in the recruiter world, they charge based on, or their value metric is the number of jobs you're going to post in a quarter. In Salesforce, their value metric is the number of emails you're going to send to strangers that you don't know.
Yeah, Navigator. Yes.
Right? And so this is just a pricing metric that companies use. Could I think of some others off the top of my head? Oh, go ahead. Put the pressure on me. Give me a company and I'll find it.
Like a CRM system.
Also, CRMs. So CRMs can charge by the users. So some CRMs do charge by the number of users you have on it, right? Some CRMs can charge based on the number of contacts you have or the number of emails you send out, right? And so all of these are what's the value metric, the pricing metric they're choosing to use, and how do you value that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you start to think about different software programs that you use, and I think so many default to users, right? It's a very known sort of structure, and they're like, oh, more users, more money. More users, you probably have more revenue, size of the company, right? Like they use that as a stand-in for lots of things. I don't know that it's always the most closely related to value. It's just a very accepted way of doing it.
So can I say, probably most often it is not the optimal pricing metric.
Correct, but it is most common.
It is most common. There is no doubt. So what happens is let's talk about Salesforce for a second, right? So Salesforce is one of those where you want every salesperson to have access to Salesforce. But when they charge by the user, they tend not to let marketing people have access. They tend not to let admin people have access. But the more marketing people and the more admin people have access to Salesforce, the stickier it becomes. The much less likely it is that churn's going to happen. And so what they've done is they've priced it in a way that they're not allowing their customers to get the full value of their product. I'm not going to say Salesforce is bad because they've done a phenomenal job.
They're not hungry, right? I mean, they're not like,
yeah, exactly.
They're all right.
But when you just think through what they've done and what the ramifications are, what the implications are, I've been in companies where we debate who gets access to Salesforce and who doesn't.
Yeah, and you're limiting the usage there. So it's a very important one. Mark, there are 6 total. We've talked raising prices, market segmentation, communicating value, pricing metric.
If I were choosing the next one, it would probably be packaging.
Of course it would be. Tell me more about packaging. Not the packages that Uber is delivering as part of that segment, but packaging. And packaging is, I mean, I think it's also something that is very much a product, something product should be thinking about. It's also very much something marketing and product marketing should be thinking about. And there's a lot of power in thinking of packaging.
Yeah. And so the reason I like packaging at this point in time for the conversation is it fits directly under market segments. Right? So we've got market segments that are well defined. Now we have to decide, well, how is it that we package the features so that we can capture as much value from that market segment as possible? If you know me at all, you know that I'm a huge fan of good, better, best, right? Exactly. Every single one of my customers, I think through, can we use good, better, best? Does it make sense to use good? Now, by the way, we don't always succeed. It isn't always the optimal package. But when it is the optimal package, it is great. But the key is we want to craft a product portfolio for a specific market segment. And that is what I think of as packaging. Now, let's go back to Uber for a second. right? In the world of Uber people, they have Uber X, Uber XL, Uber Rideshare, Uber Ski here in Reno. It'll take your skis up to the mountain.
Nice.
I've heard they have Uber Pets.
They do indeed, but you have to go with your pet, but they'll take your dog.
They'll take your dog. Okay, good. And so these are just packages underneath the Uber people market segment. And so what we want to be doing is thinking about, I've got this whole set of features. I've got a market segment that's got a set of problems. How is it now that I can craft the portfolio so that the people within that market segment that are willing to pay more actually pay more? And the people within the market segment who aren't as willing to pay as much don't pay as much. Oh, I forgot Uber Comfort. That's my favorite.
You're such a high maintenance traveler, Mark.
I only take Uber Comfort when I'm traveling with my wife.
Oh, well, Carol's not high maintenance, so I'm still putting this on you. In terms of like, when you give those examples of Uber, like when you think of like Uber Pets or Uber XL with more people, what makes those a packaging type versus like a marketing segment, like a small marketing segment or a subset?
Yeah, I think there's lots of areas of gray here because I could say the exact same thing for any good, better, best scenario that says, hey, when I put in a best category, I put in capabilities that you don't get in better. When I create better, I put in capabilities you don't get in good. So there's always problems you can solve with the better and then problems you can solve with the best. And so I would think of those as minor or ancillary problems that I'm trying to solve, but it's underneath the large problem of I need to move people from point A to point B, right? And so you could argue that it's all tiny market segments if you want, but
you're right that the problem is the same. There's just flavors of it that are going to want to have potentially different features or aspects, right?
Absolutely. But let's take your observation a step further. What if we suddenly realized there was a really large market segment of people wanting to travel with pets, right? Then what we could do is we could take Uber Pets and break it out into its own little market segment. And we could have Uber large dogs, Uber cats, Uber birds, right? I mean, we could actually have Ubers for different types of pets or numbers of pets or, whatever, Uber horse. How's that?
Oh, wow. With a trailer and everything. Right. I mean, it would work up here. I'm not going to lie. There would be people. But.
Yeah. But if there was enough demand, you could easily break that into a market segment. And now let's go back to communicating value. Suddenly, we've got a whole new marketing campaign that we put on around Uber Pets.
Yeah.
It's not just Uber or Uber people.
Nice. I'm going to have to insist that I select the topic we talk about next.
Okay, go ahead.
There's only one more, guys. But we talked about market segments.
Aren't there two?
Oh, maybe I get a surprise seventh.
Maybe not. Did we talk about raising prices?
We started with raising prices because I thought that was going to be your one thing you missed, everybody. So we did raising prices, market segmentation, communicating value, pricing metric, packaging, and now we're going to talk price segmentation.
Yes, love price segmentation. Okay, so we're at the very bottom of the value architecture now. We've identified a market segment. We've crafted a product portfolio, and I'm sure it was good, better, best when we did it. You could take any one of the products that you've got in your product portfolio, and you've put a price on it. We'll call it $100 for the sake of argument. And now some people want to buy that product, but they're not willing to pay $100. Would I sell it for $80? Well, yeah, I probably would. Would I sell it for $60? Maybe, right? And so price segmentation is all about how do I take an individual product and charge different prices to different customers for that product. So in the world of Uber, we all know about surge pricing. They absolutely do that in surge pricing, right? So they charge me different prices based on what demand looks like at the time. We see this in many, many, many industries. But in the world of B2B, if you've got implementation costs for your SaaS, you should be charging higher prices first off, for anybody who demands instantaneous installation, right? Someone who needs it quickly. We should have higher prices for those people. As your supply of installers goes down or gets used up, we should be thinking about how do we get prices up, because we're only selling now to people who value our product the most, but that's who we need to sell to, right? We want to capture as much as we possibly can. And so price segmentation is really just us systematically thinking through who's willing to pay how much for this specific product. And then how do I craft pricing strategies where I can get it at different times, different places, different people?
I think of geography is a place, right? Industry, size of an organization. That doesn't necessarily if you're a seat, but companies under $10 million is this much. Over that is a different price, right? Those are ways that you can think about segmentation, different price for the same product.
Yeah, and if you have a direct sales force that negotiates prices, you are doing price segmentation
on an individual client basis.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And so, there's nothing wrong with negotiating prices. Right? That's a great thing. What you really want to make sure you're doing is teaching your salespeople how to communicate the value of the product and how to hold that value so they don't give away too much of the price. But there are some people who aren't getting enough value, and we have to negotiate in order to win that deal.
Absolutely. Okay, so we talked about sort of the 6 areas where we can kind of maximize our return on the value we deliver, right? Raising prices, market segmentation, communicating the value, pricing metrics, packaging, price segmentation. And I can tell you every single person as I just went through that list went like, yep, that's true. And it's really overwhelming. So I'm going to tackle this next year, right? So how do you help people really see within these 6 areas where they have the opportunity and where they should focus their energy? We can't do all of it at once. How do you help them figure out where to focus?
Yeah, one of my clients helped me do this, but we put together an opportunity signals worksheet. And all it does is it goes through and asks you a bunch of questions about your company, about your situation, where you are. And the questions are in categories. The categories are not the 6 areas of action that you could take, but just categories of your company. And then after you go through and just answer those yes or no, it gives you a recommendation to say, look, you've got an opportunity in raising prices. You've got an opportunity in market segmentation. And you could just take the ones with the highest score and say, look, I think I'm going to go focus on that one. Let me see what I can learn. Let me see what I can do. You can't do everything at once. It's impossible to get your arms around it, to have enough time. And so this tool just gives you the ability to say, look, this is probably where the low-hanging fruit is. Let me go there first.
And I really love how sort of it's like simplistic it is. It's like a little over 40 questions, right? Like you said, it's yes or no. It's mostly things that you will know already, or that you can get pretty quickly. But just walking you through those and going, okay, the signals are. It looks like you have some place, some opportunity in this area. You should spend some extra time digging in. Is I think a really neat thing.
Yeah. Do you mind? Can I just read a few of them just for fun?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So these are some of the yes/no questions. So imagine that these are all in first person. So this is you saying the words. So my favorite one on here is our price list is confusing. Right? How about our competitors have recently raised prices? How about our NRR, net revenue retention, isn't high enough? Oh, we are afraid to raise prices. Who doesn't say yes to that?
Right.
We have price erosion. So these are all great. I mean, every question's like those. They're pretty simple to understand. So it's just a yes or no. And then it gives you guidance on where you're going to go look for the next opportunity.
And I like it too that, so it's kind of across all different ways, right? Like you said, it's about sort of your financials. It's about differentiation, competition, sort of sales and marketing, customer experience and satisfaction. Those are the areas the questions are in. Then behind the scenes, the magic happens and kind of points it through. But it's also a really good exercise, not for just for you to do, but to kind of share or do with leadership to help them also understand where these opportunity lies and buy into the decision process to really spend some time and focus there.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. Anytime you start you start asking different people questions and you get different answers, it opens up dialogue. It opens up conversation to say, look, where do we think the issues really are?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a great feel as well. But it was designed to get people started quickly and not be a heavy lift to go get something accomplished, or at least see where we need to work.
Yes. So I know we will put the link into the show notes to this tool. It's free on your website, but I think it's at impactpricing.com/pricing-opportunity-signals. And it is, I've played around with it. I think it's a great tool to kind of help go, okay, I know there's some revenue opportunity here that we are not capitalizing on all the value we deliver. Let's prioritize where we should focus our efforts in order to kind of start to raise those numbers up.
Absolutely. I think every company fails at capitalizing on the value they deliver, which is sad, right? Because companies exist to create value for customers.
Yes.
And so this is just a tool to help them get started.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. We talked about lots of different things today, Mark. If you were going to have our listeners do, he knows it's coming. You'd think he'd be prepared. Two things differently tomorrow based on what we talked about today, what would that be?
I'm going to say fill out the opportunity signals worksheets.
Oh, a good one.
That is a good one. And then the other one is find one situation, buyer, product, and raise prices.
I love that. Love that. All right, Mark, it was absolutely wonderful having you on today. You are
Thank you, Rebecca. It's always fun.
Better in the good, better, best podcast. But yeah, no, it was great having you on. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, that does it for today's episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And don't forget to join us next week when we tackle another great topic designed to help you elevate your product, your company, and your career.